Hey guys, Fox here, and it's time to do the second team recap for the USFL and XFL Dispersal drafts. We're going to be doing the USFL Dispersal draft and the Birmingham Stallions draft recap. The Birmingham Stallions are the defending champions from the USFL and are widely regarded as the best team in spring football, so let's see who they added in the USFL Dispersal draft. First off, we're going to be looking at Calvin Ashley, offensive tackle. An insanely massive ad, as Calvin Ashley is an all USFL player. He was an all USFL player as part of the Generals' insanely good offensive line that produced the number one team in having only 14 sacks allowed, the lowest in the league, and had the most rushing yards at 134.2. Ashley was a huge part of the Generals' offensive line and now helps the Stallions have an even better line than they already had. The next pick is Marcus Baugh, tight end, coming from the Breakers. He signed to the Breakers as a free agent, but the last 2 years he was on the Panthers. This past season he had 2 receiving TDs and he had 199 receiving yards. He wasn't insane, but is overall a really solid depth piece to have at tight end behind Jay Sternberger, so it's definitely a really solid player to add. The next guy is Chris Blewett, kicker from the Pittsburgh Maulers. I personally am very shocked at this pick. I know a lot of people seem to be really happy about it, but the fact is, to me, I feel like this is one where the Stallions got the wrong guy. Personally, I would say Blewett was the third best kicker available. I think both Matt Conklin and Luis Aguilar were both better. Now, if they weren't available for some reason, they said they were done, that's one thing. But the fact is, those two guys were both better than Blewett. So the fact that Blewett was the guy that the Stallions picked when they needed a kicker is that was their number one position to need after Brandon Aubrey left for the Dallas Cowboys. Getting Chris Blewett is kind of weird. He was sixth in field goal percentage and tied for sixth in extra point percentage. So it's not like he was the most accurate kicker in the league. And those other two guys in Conklin and Aguilar were both simply put better than Blewett. So it's a risky pick, but it's not like Blewett is bad by any means. It's just there's a couple guys that are better than him. Next, we have Cam Carter, another guy that played for the New Jersey Generals. He wasn't an all-USFL guy, but he was a starter on that offensive line. So adding another one of those top-tier O-linemen from the Generals is a very solid addition for the Stallions. Now we get to Daniel Isom. Isom was a pretty big signing for the Stars in free agency, as he's had some NFL experience, and now the Stallions get him to add to their back end on defense. Pretty solid pick. The Stallions added a lot of those type of players as well, the guys that, haven't played in spring football but have some NFL experience. So he fits right into what they've been trying to get. And then next we have one of the biggest signings they got in Hercules Matafa. This is big. This is really big. Hercules was insane this past year. Tied for third in sacks, tied for eighth in TFLs, and tied for first in forced fumbles. 3 forced fumbles and 6 sacks is overall pretty incredible. The fact is he was a huge, huge piece of the Generals' defense the past couple of years. So getting him to the Stallions is going to help him out on the defensive line especially. So this is going to be a huge help getting some pressures on the quarterbacks. Dude is a monster. But the real monster was Chris Orr. Yes, they got the all-USFL linebacker Chris Orr himself. One of the elite linebackers in all of spring football is heading to the Stallions. The Stallions already have Scooby Wright. They already signed Keava Tizino, and now they add Chris Orr to the linebacking core. Orr was tied for third in tackles, fourth in solo tackles, and tied for sixth in TFLs. He also had 2 passes defended, 2.5 sacks, and overall was just really solid this past year. During the beginning of the year, it looked like he would be a DPOY candidate, and in the end, he just kind of fell off because of how good Frank Gidna ended up being. But Orr was still incredible, and this is a huge add for the Birmingham Stallions. Then we have Henri St. Amour of the New Orleans Breakers heading to the Stallions. Another huge piece to add to the defensive line. Another guy that had 6 sacks, tied for third in the league, and was tied for sixth in TFLs. 7 TFLs, 6 sacks, really solid. He was a huge piece of the Breakers defense that was pretty underrated, especially in their pass rush ability. So getting a guy like him to your team is a pretty big add. This guy's going to be a monster with Hercules and is going to provide a really big 1-2 punch. But we all know one of the biggest ones, and that's Channing Stribling. Now, this past year, it wasn't nearly as impressive as the year before, as in 2022, he led the entire league in interceptions, having an interception in every game he played. But Stribling is still an elite cornerback. If he's able to come back to more of that 2022 form, being able to get a bunch of interceptions, it's going to be an even bigger add than it already is, as he still is one of the better cornerbacks in spring football. It's just he did take a step back this past year, but it's still a huge add for the Birmingham Stallions. Then they added another defensive back, and Eli Walker, safety from the Maulers. A guy who had 1 interception, did have 2 fumble recoveries for touchdowns. Another solid player to add to the back end. The Stallions are pretty much fully set on offense. As I've talked about before, this past season, the Stallions basically ran their backups throughout the entire year on offense. Magoo was a backup. Maribel was a backup. Their whole wide receiving core had to step up after Marlon Williams went down. So they really don't need that much help in offense. but this is definitely going to be a huge help for the defense along with the other guys, as well as James Wiggins. James Wiggins played on the Breakers this past year. He was tied for seventh in the USFL interceptions with 2. Very solid player. Not, the biggest name guy, but another guy to add to the defense is definitely going to be helpful. The Stallions pretty much focused in on defense in this dispersal draft, which, as I said, makes sense. They have a bunch of offensive guys who are going to be healthy this upcoming season to go with the guys they already had last year. So it's not like they needed a lot of help on offense, but defense is the only part that was somewhat weak, and they've pretty much gotten rid of all those issues, with the only question being the debatable choice at kicker. So that'll pretty much do it for the Birmingham Stallions draft recap. Next one is going to be the DC Defenders, so be on the lookout for that. As always, have a great night.